Hi everybody, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of inside baseball on what happens in real trials. We recently had one, Arizona versus John Elliott. I did a video on my initial reaction to the verdict. Super grateful for that. Go watch that one if you have not seen it. Link is in the description. Now, I also here today, on today's video, I want to talk to you about the work that I did as an expert witness and how that went together and coalesced into the expert report that I wrote, which then was the center of my testimony at trial.
Download the ASP Unlimited app for all the content you love from Active Self-Protection and more with no interference from YouTube. No ads, no age gates, exclusive videos, seminars, classes, and more on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Hit the link in the description or download ASP Unlimited from your app store today.
I'm just putting this together so that you all can see kind of what an expert witness does, how they are engaged, and what goes into the work that we do. Just so you can see that kind of stuff if you're doing it, and keeping score at home. I'm also going to talk to you about what it costs to actually engage an expert witness in this kind of event, because the attorney called me, said, or emailed me at first, John, I have a case that I might need you to work on that I'm interested in hiring you for. Cool, give me a call, let's talk about your case. Calls me, let's talk about it. He gives me an overview of what happened. In this case, his client was walking his dog down the street. A dog got loose from its owner and ran at his client, barking and snapping as he ran at his client. His client pulled a pistol, shot that dog one time as it came right up to him, and that was fatal to the dog. He's been charged with 2 felonies, with animal cruelty and unlawful discharge of a firearm inside of city limits. Both of those are felonies in Arizona. That's a big deal. And so I said, okay, well, that sounds just on its face like it could very well be a justified use of deadly force. So send me a retainer and and send me all the discovery, everything. I want, I pull a Ron Swanson here, right? You remember the whole, just give me all the bacon and eggs you have. Wait, I worry that you heard bring me a lot of bacon and eggs. What I said was, give me all the bacon and eggs you have. I literally do similar. I go, just send me all of the discovery. Wait, I'm worried that you heard send me all the discovery you think is important to me. What I said was, send me all of the discovery. Send me every piece of evidence that you have so that I can get a full look on what happened. He did. I looked through it all. I had to sit and watch a bunch of badge cams and listen to a bunch of interviews, and that takes a lot of time. Said, okay, I have an opinion here. Here's what my opinion is. My opinion is this was a justified use of deadly force, and I don't think the prosecution has any hope of proving that it was not a justified use of deadly force. So would you like me to proceed to writing a report? Yes. Okay, so I wrote a report. I have linked for you that report in the description. That report was filed with the court. It was not admitted as evidence because the prosecution wanted to limit a little bit of what I said. But I've linked it for you. I've put it up and you can access it so you can read it if you would like. I have lightly redacted it to basically keep my address and my phone number out of things. Now, I will walk you through the pertinent parts of it, because here's what we did, is that I first started, I watched all of the analysis, including John's statement to the police after his Miranda warnings. Separate video on that coming. That's egregious craziness. And interviews with the head detective, Sergeant McInerney, with Lori Bathke, who was in control of the dogs that day. And so watched all of those and listened to all of those. What did everybody say? What did the evidence say? Well, there's a few things that were really kind of weird and kind of interesting to me here, that they filed felony charges, but there wasn't even a police sketch of the crime scene. There was no actual, they didn't actually make a crime scene. They didn't take any measurements. They didn't take any pictures of the actual scene of the crime. We had some pictures, a couple of pictures from bystanders, like cell phone pictures of John a couple of minutes afterwards, of the dogs in various places afterwards. Again, minutes after, and then a couple pictures of the dog after it had died and had been transported to the Humane Society. It was destroyed a couple of days later. But no measurements from the crime scene, where the dog lay, where these other ones were. I literally had to do that stuff myself via Google Maps. So started looking over all of these things, and then I said, you know, what the biggest issue in this particular case is that we need to determine how much time John had. We need to determine how much speed and perception and decision making is going to be a major factor here. Because if he had all day to sit and think about things, he may have done things differently. But he didn't. The dogs, what we determined was they were somewhere about 100 to 110 feet apart from where John was standing, approximately, to the back of the car, approximately. Again, we don't know exactly because there's no video evidence of the incident and because the police didn't make a crime scene, any kind of measurements at the crime scene at all. There was no actual forensics done there. There was no pictures taken. None of that stuff. And so just a really shoddy investigation from that perspective. So, okay, well, how fast can a Labrador Retriever run? To the Googles. Let's go find out. This dog in question was about a 3-year-old lab. I don't even know how much the lab weighed because we don't have any data on the record. The dog wasn't even weighed. Sergeant McInerney went and looked at it afterwards and reported what he saw, but we didn't even have an autopsy done on the dog. So what the heck, man? Like, we don't even know any of that stuff. Blah, it's a mess. Anyway, so we said, okay, what do we find? Well, I went online and looked and found a couple of YouTube videos actually of guys like throwing balls for their kind of highly motivated labs and then using a radar gun to see how fast they run. And we saw labs running as fast as 31, 32, 33 miles an hour. All right, cool. Then we got to figure out, wait a minute, what does that translate into? Well, what we translate that into is you do a little bit of math and you're like, wait a minute, if there's 110 feet between where John was standing and where the back of the car was that the dogs came around when they got out of the car and were loose and were running at him, then how much time is that? Well, if they're doing 30 miles an hour, well, that's as little as like 2.3 seconds that they could have. Well, if the dog's not running at full speed, though, maybe he has a little bit more time. So he could have as much, if the dog was running at like 2/3 speed and was running at maybe 20 miles an hour, well, then he would have maybe as much as 3.4 seconds total. Now, that's not the time from when he saw the dogs. That's the time from when the dogs came around the car. What direction was he facing? Where was he looking? How long did it take him to identify and look and see the motion and then actually like put his eyes on that motion and figure out what it was? We don't know, but how long would it take from the edge of the car where they could be seen to when they were on him? Somewhere from 2.3 to 3.4 seconds. And that's a ridiculously compressed time frame. So then what we did, and I'll show you this in the report, I'll show you a couple pictures, is I went and I got the authorization from the defense attorney to do this, is we had a very compressed time frame because the trial was coming up pretty fast, and the prosecution wanted to do a pretrial interview with me, and also that meant that I needed to have my report submitted. And so submitted to the court and submitted to the prosecution. So I put a call out. Frankly, I put a call out on my Facebook friends list. Hey, I need a couple somewhere around 50-pound dogs that are good enough dogs that they can run, about 100 feet. So from around 100 feet away from me, and run kind of right by me at speed and let me videotape that. And I had 2 different friends that both said, I have a pup that will work for you. And so then what we did, I took video of that. So first one was an American Staffordshire Terrier. That's what a lot of people would call a pit. That's the technical kind of breed that a lot of people would call a pit bull. Named Honey, and that is owned by one friend of mine. And then the second one was a 65-ish pound Belgian Malinois named Pistol, owned by another friend of mine. And they both said, sure, I'll do that for you. So we set up the cameras and we set up markers every 10 feet, and we had those dogs run by me a couple of times and then videoed it. Then what I did is in post-production, I went back home and I said, okay, so at what frame does the dog run by me? Here's that frame. Then what we did was we compared how long does it take to make a decision, okay? How long does it take to make a decision in simple versus complex environments? And for that, I went back and looked at the research of Bill Lewinsky et al. Dr. Lewinsky, of course, the head of Force Science, the founder of Force Science. And they did some really fascinating research with trained police officers about the time to make a decision. And there's a difference between a very clear decision and a complicated decision, a complex decision, and a chaotic decision. But a simple decision would be something like, you're going to put your hand next to this button and you're going to watch this light. When the light goes on, hit the button. Okay, that's a very simple decision. You've already pre-programmed exactly what you're going to do. You're just waiting for the stimulus and the response. See the light, hit the button. See the light, hit the button. And that is very simple. Usually that's around a quarter second for people to do that. Now, if we make it a complex decision, and it doesn't have to be highly complex, if all we have to say is there are two buttons in front of you, if you see the red light turn on, hit the left button. If you see the green light turn on, hit the right button. Simple as that. Now, if you do that, you increase the time to make the decision from 0.25 seconds from the experiments that they conducted to 0.56 seconds plus or minus 0.08. And so it doubles the time to make a decision. So what we were looking at here and why we were looking at it was the dog was shot in the top of its right shoulder as it went, which kind of tracks with maybe as it went by John Elliott. But when did he make a decision? Where was the dog when he decided, I need to shoot this dog in order to then make a decision, program the action, have the stimulus go down his arm and press the trigger? Well, that can take a half second, 0.5 seconds, 0.56 plus or minus 0.08. And that's still it's a complex decision, but not a complicated decision, which is kind of where John was. He was in a complicated situation, another dog running at him that had just peeled off. Do I need to shoot this dog? Is that the best answer? What other answers are available to me? And so, but let's just call it a complex decision and say he had a half second, okay? That he made a decision a half second before. How far was that dog when he made that half second before? So let me show you a couple of the pictures. Here's the first one that we had with Honey. And in this first one with the pit bull, the American Staffordshire Terrier named Honey, the first picture that I did was in my report here's Honey at the split second at the frame where she ran by me. I recorded this in 4K 60. And the 4 red lines are simply 10-foot increments. I had marked those 10 feet. We'd measured them out and marked them with little blue boxes. They're actually MagTech ammo boxes. That's just what I had available. But they weren't easy to see on camera. You could see them when you're looking at them, but they weren't readily apparent. So I used the lines. I made the lines in post-production, vertical lines, so that you can see where they are relative. And so in this first one is the Honey running past me. And so that's time frame, we're gonna call that 0. Second picture that I showed was on the first run by me. I backed up 30 frames or 0.5 seconds, and this is where Honey was 0.5 seconds before. She was 18 feet from her nose to me, approximately, not quite 20, because you can see she's her body is in the middle of the 20, but she's not completely past it. So she's somewhere around 18 feet from me, half second before she got to me. Now, if you do that math, she's about 20 feet away, 18 feet away, then that last 20 feet, she's traveling at about 25 miles an hour. So that dog was traveling within what we know a lab can run at, right? So labs can run at up to 33 miles an hour that I've been able to kind of verify. So 25 miles an hour is within that. So I can't tell you how fast she was running because we don't have that dog available and we don't have video of the actual incident. But we know that this particular one can show us that that dog could be 18 feet away and still be within the capabilities of what a Labrador Retriever would be doing. The next picture that I showed here was the second run we did with Honey. And on that one, she was a little closer. She was about 15 feet away at the 0.5 seconds on her second run. She wasn't running as hard. She was getting a little tired. And she's not, a high drive dog. It's kind of funny, in trial, one of the jurors asked a question of what were we using to motivate the dogs to run past me? Treats. We were like, hey, you want a treat? Let him go, here's a treat, here's a treat. And then the dogs would run right past me for the treat. So on this one though, Honey was about 15 feet away from me. Okay, that means she was running about 20 miles an hour. We repeated that a second time, a day and a half later, I think, with Pistol. On this particular one, I didn't need to do the lines because we used big orange cones. We had big orange cones available to mark out every 10 feet, so I didn't need to put the lines. So in the first picture that you see here, that's Pistol as he runs by me. This second one here, you can see Pistol's about 13 to 15 feet away from me, 0.5 seconds ahead of time, maybe 12 feet. So considerably slower than the capabilities of a Labrador Retriever, right? So considerably slower. On the second one, you can see he was going a little faster. And so here he's somewhere around 18 feet from me, give or take as well. So he was moving a little bit faster that time. So you can see how far that is. Now here's an interesting one, the two that I wanted to show you. On this particular iteration, we actually had a camera right behind me as well. So we put a camera right behind me so that you can see, and in this first picture here, you can see this is Pistol as he ran just by me. Now, yes, he ran by me on the left, not the right. And again, we know the dog was shot in the right shoulder. He ran by John on the right side. John is right-handed. He was holding a pistol in his right hand. I screwed that part up. So, but I could have reversed this. I could have just made the photos opposite, but I didn't want to visually alter it at all and then have to explain all that. So we just left it as is. Figured the jury was smart enough to figure it out. Second picture from behind me, this was on the first run, and this is him about 12 feet from me. Now, again, what you see is that what we were able to argue to the jury is, does that dog look like it's running at me or by me? And could plausibly a reasonable or a regular, ordinary, typical person look at that running and think that dog is running at me under the compressed time frame of that dog is barking and running hard at me? I think the answer to that's pretty well yes. Third picture here from this angle that we show is the next run, the second run, where he was about 18 feet from me. Does this dog look like it's running at me? Yes. So then what we were able to show with this demonstration is under this compressed time frame, tightly compressed time frame, again, at most 3.4 seconds from when the dog came around. Now, he didn't have 3.4 seconds unless he was staring there and ready for something to come out from there, which is just asinine to think. You know, he's just walking his dog. He's bebopping along, and then all of a sudden, these dogs tear out, and maybe he's looking over here, and then the dogs come out, and he hears a commotion. Oh, geez, they're considerably closer than that already. He's got less time than that. Oh no, I got to get my pistol out. Could an ordinary person of typical abilities and regular faculty look at that and say, I need to do that, and then again, program the action, may have the stimulus. This is the stimulus right here that says I have to shoot. This dog is going to run me over, especially for a 75-year-old man. Because again, if that dog is likely to put you in the hospital, that is considered a deadly threat, right? A deadly threat is a threat of death or great bodily injury. And therefore, could we say a typical person of ordinary abilities and regular faculties at 75 years old perceive this as a threat that it's going to put him in the hospital? Yeah, I think we absolutely could, and he had to make that determination in a very compressed time frame. And so, as Oliver Wendell Holmes is famous for saying in Brown versus United States, we cannot expect cool reflection upon the point of an upturned knife. Now, the prosecutor tried to make hay that, well, wait a minute, we're talking about a knife there, not a dog. Well, yeah, but again, will knocking a 75-year-old man over even, a dog that doesn't maul you with its teeth, but knocks you over because it runs at you hard, is it highly likely to put a 75-year-old man in the hospital? Yeah. In my training, background, experience, and education, yes. We don't have a particular age in Arizona that marks somebody as elderly and frail, but I think clearly a 75-year-old man could reasonably worry about that, and that would make that a reasonable inference, and therefore he would it would be understandable if he feared for his life. You can hear me, I'm being very careful. I'm trying not to use the word reasonable because that's the providence of the jury to determine what's reasonable. But we did that demonstration. So we did those two demonstrations. Now, I will say this, you can read the rest of my expert report because it has all kinds of other stuff in there, issues of memory, of interviewing, of distances, the threat of a dog bite. We did some research on the threat of a dog bite, and then the analysis of the facts that we knew, the demonstration that we did for the time frame that we had, the issues that are before us, and the law as it applies in Arizona. And I came to my conclusions that this was a justified use of deadly force. Now, the prosecutor said, wait a minute, this is all stuff that's the provenance of the jury. The judge kind of sort of held it in abeyance and said, well, he can absolutely testify to issues of perception and speed and decision-making. That's coming in without any problem. The other stuff, I'm going to say, well, we'll hold it in abeyance. And so we did all that in testimony. And then the funny part is, so then the prosecutor had done a pretty good job. He kind of won narrowing the scope of my testimony. And then on cross-examination, he started asking me all kinds of stuff about reasonable use of force and the force continuum and different force options and what training would do for those kinds of things. And so he just opened up all kinds of doors for the defense attorney on redirect to talk about the issues that he didn't want me to talk about from the stand. Okay, super fine. Let's do that. He did that. I thought that was a big mistake. So that was the report that that I wrote. You can read the whole thing if you'd like, ends up being 25 pages long, something like that, plus my CV as the addendum. And this is the kind of thing that experts do. And then that was the basis of my testimony. So we submitted that to the court and to the prosecution. Prosecution then did a pretrial interview where basically they asked me a bunch of questions about my report and also tried to say, well, but wait a minute, what about this? And why didn't you do that? And why was it this and the other thing? And try to kind of discredit it, which is their job. I get it. We answered all those. And then that was the basis of my testimony at trial. And I'm trying to get my testimony at trial. I'm trying to get the whole trial, in fact, to put in the ASP Unlimited app. So anyhow, that's what an expert report does. Now, what does this kind of stuff cost? Well, we can talk about trial separately. Gosh, man, everybody kind of gets weird about this stuff, to be honest with you, in terms of costs. You can see on my expert report, though, I mean, it states compensation that's in there, that I'm compensated $500 an hour for my consulting time and for prep, and then $5,000 a day plus expenses for trial. That's what my going rates are. And that includes any travel days. In this case, we didn't have any travel days because it's a 2-hour drive away from me. So I stayed at home. What ends up at all of this? I will tell you what all of this ended up costing John, right? Costing the client. That he first paid me a $5,000 retainer through the attorney always. So he first paid me 10 hours, paid me for 10 hours of stuff. The 10 hours was gone almost just looking through things, quite frankly. And then I'm gonna put my glasses on so that I don't make mistakes here, because I wanna make sure that I give you the best information on this. So we are about to send the finals on this, our final invoices on that. So I cut him a break a little bit here. So before trial work for discovery, demonstration, and the report, I charged him 22.5 hours. Now, again, that is listening to all the badge cams, reading through all the discovery, consultations and conversations with the attorney, doing the demonstration, filming it, figuring out what we needed to do, post-production on that, taking the stills out, marking them up correctly, and then writing up the report. 22.5 hours for that. Again, minus the 10 hours that I received in the retainer. So, we're going to bill that stuff. And then 1 day of trial and then some mileage, right? So my particular part in this cost the defendant around $16,500. That's what an expert cost him for his trial. Now, I will tell you that at the end of the trial, he was found not guilty of both charges. The attorney sent me a text and said that he believed that my testimony sealed the deal, that my testimony was what really showed the jury how reasonable what he did was. I don't take credit for that. I think John did a great job in his testimony as the defendant. The attorneys did a great job in presenting the case fairly to the jury, so I'm not taking credit for that. I'm glad to help. I'm glad to be an educator in any way. Again, it cost John a lot of money, about $16,500 in order to have me. What's he into his attorneys for? I'm not involved in that discussion. I can't imagine it's cheap. I can't imagine it's less than $100,000 because of all the work they did. I mean, these guys showed up with binders, fat binders, like 4 big fat binders with everything in it and all their prep work and the hundreds of hours that they put into interviewing and legal theories and motions and pretrial work and tons of money, tons of time. Now, John is very glad to be home and free tonight, and good for him for that, and I'm super grateful to him for that. But remember what we said in our first video, the lessons here are only use deadly force if the alternative is completely unacceptable, right? And I think as a 75-year-old man, I'm gonna fall, break my hip, go to the hospital and maybe die. That's an unacceptable outcome. So you use deadly force and you deal with it. You do what you gotta do. I also think it's a good reminder to all of us. Again, this was a dog attack. I've used OC spray successfully against dogs multiple times. It's very effective against dogs. And I am of the mindset that unless you are really fighting like a trained dog, even if the OC spray ends up being kind of non-factor for the dog, just whacking them in the face with the liquid kind of resets them. And I've seen it do that multiple times. So carry an OC spray, okay? Keep that sucker in your pocket. Walk with it in your hand while you're walking your dog. And again, we'll talk about technique on that another day. So there's my expert report. Figured you might find that interesting. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Would love to hear your thoughts on what we did as far as a demonstration. And after you read the report, what questions are you left with? What about the work of an expert are you like scratching your head about and what we do? I'd love to hear from you. God bless you, everybody. Hope you have a great day.